There, Mark Regev. Hello, Mark. Nice to have you.
Pleasure.
Also in Washington, Hussein Ibish, the communications director with the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee. Hussein, nice to see you as well. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. This was one heck of a bomb. It was one of the deadliest suicide bombings in the past 3 years. Did yesterday's attack effectively kill off the ceasefire? What can be done to keep the roadmap to peace alive? I'll ask you that first, Hussein.
Well, I hope not. It shouldn't, because these kind of things are going to happen. Groups are going to continue. Some people on both sides are committed to continuing the violence. I don't think we can give them a veto on achieving, a peaceful future. Those of us who follow the region have been bracing ourselves for this since the killing of the Islamic Jihad senior official Mohammed Sidr about 10 days ago by Israeli forces. So we knew that Islamic Jihad would try something. You're right about this bomb. This was an incredibly cruel and incredibly stupid act by the Palestinian extremist group Islamic Jihad. But I don't think we can allow these kind of miscalculations and acts of stupidity and cruelty to drag us back into the cycle of violence. I think that would just be giving extremists what they want, and I think it would be a tragic error.
All right, Mark, do the Israelis see it that way? Do they believe that we can still hold talks to develop some sort of a truce and get back on the roadmap to peace, or you think military intervention is forthcoming?
Israel wants this process of peace to work. Israel wants a peaceful relationship with the Palestinians. We want the roadmap to succeed. I want to be unequivocal about that. But the roadmap is very clear what the Palestinian Authority must do. There's no waffly language here. The Palestinian Authority under the roadmap must disarm the Hamas and Islamic groups. They must confiscate all their weapons. They must close down where they have their explosive factories, where they make their rockets and so forth. This is an American request. This is an Israeli request. This is a European request. Everyone is waiting now for the Palestinian Authority to act. Yesterday when this terrible bombing happened, the Prime Minister of the Palestinian Authority was negotiating with Islamic Jihad. This, in our point of view, is the wrong strategy. You can't negotiate with these jihadist killers. It's very important, if this process is going to succeed, if the new Palestinian leadership wants to be considered a partner in peace, that they have a no-tolerance policy on these sort of terrible terrorist acts, that they come down on these groups like a ton of bricks.
All right. Well, to that extent, then, Hussein, you hear him say he was negotiating. The Palestinian Authorities, you well know, had already cut the ties with the terror groups.
No, they did that after the bombing, in fact. I mean, what they were doing was they were negotiating to continue the ceasefire, and I think that that was a reasonable thing to do at that stage.
Okay,
I think that at this point, though, the PA ought to do what it can to bring the people responsible for this to justice. But Mark knows that this attack originated in Hebron. The man who did this in the cell that has claimed responsibility, almost certainly was responsible, came from Hebron, which is entirely under the control of the Israeli military.
Hussein,
the PA has no police powers there. They have no security there. So I don't know what they could have done to stop it.
So Mahmoud Abbas, he can't do anything then? Will this happen again?
Hebron. He can't address security concerns of groups that are based in Hebron. I mean, no, he can't, because it's entirely under the control of the Israeli military. The Palestinian Authority has very limited powers in very small areas. Most of the occupied territories are under complete Israeli control. I think where they can do something, they need to do something, they need to do more. And if they can bring those responsible for this outrage to justice, they must do that. It would be extremely good if they could, and they really have to try. But I think that to pretend that the PA has the power and the resources and is positioned to shut down all of these activities when the Israeli army can't prevent something like this coming out of a city that's totally under their control is just not realistic.
Okay, Mark, then if the Palestinian Authority does not have the control to do it, let's look at the Israeli government. In the wake of yesterday's bombing, it cut off all the contact with the Palestinian Authority. It postponed the handover of those 4 towns in the West Bank. So what does the Israeli government need to do to restart the concessions?
Well, I don't think Israel will be making concessions in the framework of this sort of bloody terrorist attack. I think what we're doing now is all lights are on the Palestinian Authority, and we're waiting to see what they will do. What they do in the next few hours is terribly, terribly important. Arresting these particular attackers, the people behind this attack, is important, but it's clearly not enough. You have Hamas, whose center is in Gaza. You have from Gaza coming orders throughout the West Bank for these cells to operate, but it's very clear that the head is in Gaza. What we ask very clearly is for the Palestinian Authority to have a no-tolerance policy. These terrible terrorist attacks don't happen in a vacuum. There is funding, there is political support, there are weapons that are moved. It's very important that the Palestinian Authority come up and say, these people are killers, these people are terrorists. The fact that they're saying they're now not having a dialogue with him, that's nice, but that's words. What we need now is action. We need to see the arresting of officials from Islamic Jihad and Hamas. We need to see them being disarmed. We need to see the workshops where they make explosives and rockets closed down. These are all things the Palestinian Authority can do and must do.
I think the PA should take whatever action they can, but Israel has to live up to its responsibilities too, which are under the roadmap, which have been completely ignored. Stop settlement activities, dismantle the outposts constructed since March 2001. Israel hasn't met any of its responsibilities under the roadmap, so both sides need to take action. It has to be simultaneous. The Palestinians did create a relatively secure ceasefire for the past 6-7 weeks. Is in very grave danger now, but they did it, and they haven't received any tangible political rewards that has made life any better for Palestinians or led them to believe they could achieve their aim of freedom better through negotiations. That has to change. So the settlements have to stop. This wall snaking through the West Bank that's so hideous and awful, you can't keep building it, Mark. I mean, there has to be a give and take, and I agree. The PA needs to take action, but Israel must stop its settlement activities as well.
Could I be very clear? In the framework of the roadmap, Israel pulled out of the Gaza and Bethlehem. We're willing to pull out of much more. We've taken down, I think, half a dozen outposts. We're willing to take down much more. We are in the process of discussing the settlement freeze. We want to work on these issues. But the question is, has one single person from Hamas been arrested? Have we seen the closing down? In other words, it's very important that the Palestinian Authority show that it's not more of the same. You know, in the 1990s...
Well, they should arrest the
That is going to have to be the last word. Gentlemen, I appreciate both your time this morning, or afternoon, rather, Mark Regev and Hussein Ibish. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
My pleasure.